All right, well, welcome again, everybody. No need to sit at that. Come on down the front. Come on. Sorry? You need a plug. Okay, all right. I'll come and chat to you later. We can have a discussion at the back and everyone can listen in, so that's okay. All right. Well, welcome, everybody. Last weekend I caught up with Bernoulli, and thank you for all your assignments. We managed to get the DSO working eventually, and thanks for all your work. Overall, pretty impressive. I think there were a few examples where I think there's sort of some opportunities for improvement, and what I'm keen to do perhaps towards the end of the lecture today is sort of recap on some of the key points that I was keen to see in assignment 1, and hopefully that will help you in assignment 2 as well. So maybe we can cover off on some of that. Also, hopefully you've now had a chance to take a bit more of a detailed look at assignment 2. Perhaps you've got a few questions. I know there's been a couple of questions on DSO, so we can have a bit of a chat about that. What I want to talk about today is psychology of risk, and this is probably something which is going to confuse the hell out of you and really annoy you if you're a mathematical type person and you're a finance type person, because there's not many rules around this stuff, and it's very difficult to actually sort of write down equations and the like with this psychology stuff. If you've got more of a sort of a non-analytical mind, if that's the right word, you'll probably find this quite interesting. I think if any of you are interested in trading or buying stocks and shares, some of the stuff we talk about tonight might make a little bit of sense to you and might help you be a better trader as well. There's a whole area of study called behavioral economics. And if you're serious about becoming a day trader or something like that, certainly study behavioral economics before you go and invest too much of your own money in your day trading activities. So I guess one of the things that I'm interested to sort of get your input on as well is the way emotion and the way we think actually influences the decisions we make. Now, one of the things I hope that you will have seen coming through, our discussions and our lectures so far, is the fact that risk management is really about making decisions. How do we make better decisions? Well, we use risk management techniques to make those better decisions. If we haven't got any risk around a decision, well, there's no decision to be made. Okay, I mean that's fairly sort of fundamental. If we've got no choice around two things, well, there's no decision to be made, so there's no risk associated with it. It's just sort of 100% probability, if you like, for that option to be to come through. So risk management is very closely aligned with decision making. So that then leads us on to decision-making techniques, and often risk management is a decision-making technique. We use it to prioritize our limited resources. So if we're looking at different strategies, we're looking at risk management approaches to make better strategic decisions. So risk management techniques, enterprise risk management, is all about decision-making. Now, one of the things that's kind of interesting is the way our brains work. People are different from computers. I've found out when I'm trying to work with a computer, I get pretty frustrated and sometimes I want to throw it out the window and the usual stuff, and you've probably been through that sort of situation too. Our emotions get in the way of our responses. There are no emotions associated with working with a computer model. Now, to sort of demonstrate, I guess, this is a common example, a way of demonstrating sort of how our minds sometimes work. Let me see if I can get this. I'll come to those other two things I've got here in a minute. There's a question that psychologists often ask, and the question is: there's a bat and a ball that costs $1.10. The bat costs $1 more than the ball. How much does the ball cost? Okay. All right. It's a pretty simple question. So, anybody want to hazard a guess as the answer?
5 cents.
5 cents? What do you think? 5? Okay. Anybody else? 10 cents? Anybody 10 cents? Yeah? Okay. Well, I mean, this environment, you're probably thinking, oh, look, there's a trick in this. And you're all thinking, yeah, he's going to catch us out, so I'm going to be very careful. And you'd be right. There's no trick. There's no trick to it. But what's happening behind this question is there's two parts of your brain, or there's system one. They call it system 1 thinking and system 2 thinking. System 1 thinking is associated with your emotional response. It's often a sort of gut feel. System 2 is your more logical, more considered approach. Now, I mean, when I looked at this the first time, you just go, the number 10 just jumps straight out at you. I mean, I don't know how many of you sort of looked at that question and goes, oh, it's 10 cents. You know. But then when you think about it, you think, hang on, that can't be right. If it is 10 cents and the bat costs $1 more, that means the bat costs $1.10 and the ball costs $1.10. Together, that's going to be $1.20. So 10 cents can't be right. It has to be 5 cents. So congratulations to you who said 5 cents. Very smart guy. He's going to be my investment manager from now on. So. But I don't know if you can see through that example. Here's where our emotional response and our emotional thinking, often comes through. And there would be plenty of different examples that we could probably think of. I don't know. Can anybody else think of an example where we use our emotional response to make a decision? Anybody got any thoughts on that? So maybe marketing people. When we go shopping, often we make decisions based on an emotional sort of basis. Perhaps anybody got any thoughts as to where could we sort of see examples of emotional decision making rather than logical decision making? Or are you all very logical people here? Nobody ever. We're all sort of Dr. Spock, isn't it? There's Star Trek. Yeah. Say that. Sorry. Similar product but different price. Yeah. Yeah. So what are you thinking? Like. Sorry.
The larger price.
The
small price.
So the lower price, that's probably not an emotional decision so much. That's probably a more irrational decision. You go, well, I'm going to save 10 cents on if I buy this cheaper brand. Yeah, but yeah, it will come to that. Anybody got any other thoughts? Yeah. Yeah, if you go 99 cents, hey, bargain. Don't pay $1, pay 99 cents. Yeah. Rounding, go, well, the bill says $1. So 1.99, all this kind of stuff. Exactly. So this is sort of an example where it's picking up on our emotional sense. I mean, there's plenty of other sort of ideas. I mean, brands, for example. When you go into the supermarket, why do you buy Heinz baked beans and not necessarily, or maybe you do, your home brand baked beans? There's maybe some quality issues, but in general, the promotion of a brand, the value of a brand in an organisation is really hooking into your emotional needs and emotional response, like fashion and so there's many decisions that go on around the place which are irrational, if you like, irrational decisions being made which are based upon our feelings, our emotions, and not necessarily what Dr. Spock would necessarily choose. So there's been some work done in this area looking at how we respond to different decision-making situations, and there's been some very sort of what can you say, theories which have stood the test of time. Now, the first one I've mentioned here is Bernoulli and prospect theory. Now, I'm going to come to these sort of later down the track as we get into sort of what's behind some of our decision making. But I thought we can have a bit of fun, and there's you're going to sort of look at this as a test. I know. You go, what's the right answer? And I just want, it doesn't matter. I don't worry. I'm just interested in how you kind of like how people sort of often think. Now, here's an example where we've got two choices. All right, prospect A and B. Now, prospect A, it's a bit like a gamble. It's a bet. So you've got an 80% chance of winning $4,000 and a 20% chance of winning nothing. And prospect B, a guaranteed $3,000. Okay. Now I don't know. It's probably, I'm not going to count hands or anything. Who would go for prospect A? Show of hands. 4, 5. Okay, so 6. Okay, prospect B. A lot more. Okay, all right. Let's put about 90%. I'm just going to write that down. All right. Now, typically, 20% choose A, and 80% choose B. Now, even though the expected value of the risky gain is 3,200, greater than the sure gain. Okay, so you see what's happening there? People are averse to actually taking a risk. They'd rather err on the side of a guaranteed return. Now, is that good? Is that bad? That's the way we are. Okay, so it's just an interesting response. So if you were Dr. Spock, you probably look at that and you go, well, okay, I'm going to work out the probabilities of working for $4,000. Well, that's going to be 2,200. A guaranteed 3,000. I'm better off taking the risk. So that's the sort of our logical brain, but our sort of system one thinking says, oh, look, take the money. Take the money. All right. Now, moving on to the first thoughts about some of this stuff and how we respond were with this guy Daniel Bernoulli a long time ago, 1738. Now, apparently, I don't know if any of you have done physics or remember the Bernoulli equations. But anyway, the family was all connected, but Daniel Bernoulli was separate to the other Bernoulli guys. But that's by the way. Now, what he was saying, he said, the value of money is not absolute, but depends on how much money you have already. I don't know, has anybody studied utility theory here in economics? Just put your hand up if you've come across utility theory before. 1, 2, 3. Okay, all right. Now, not many. So, utility. What do we mean by utility? I remember when I studied utility a long time ago, my lecturer gave me an example. He said, Ian, it's like you go to the pub, right? Now, I don't know how many of you probably don't drink here, but but in my day, everyone used to go out to the pub. But you go and have your first beer, right? Now, it might cost you, $2 or something for the beer, but it's been a hot day. All day you've been looking forward to that beer, all right? And you pick that beer up and you go, oh, can't wait to drink this beer. So the utility or the value associated with that beer is very high. And then, so you drink that beer and you go, oh, fantastic, great, best beer ever, best beer in the world. And then you get another $2 out and you have another beer. And hey, it's still good, it's still good beer, but it's not quite as good as the first beer, right? So the utility is actually reduced slightly. And the third beer, you go, another beer, have another beer. Again, not quite as good as the first. It's not probably quite as good as the second. You're sort of getting your fill now, and so the utility is reducing. So as the numbers of beers sort of, increase, you get up to your 6th or 7th beer, you go, oh geez, I don't know if I really need this. And so your utility associated with that is almost zero. And then if you push it too far, you can actually go into negative utility. But you can imagine that gets a bit messy. But you kind of get the point. So the point of utility is that money has some form of utility. So if you've got no money at all, your first dollar is really important to you. If you've got $1 million, another dollar is not going to be as important to you as that first dollar you had when you had $0. Yeah. So your utility, is reducing the more money that you have. And this is the point that he was making. Now, so what he's saying is any increase in wealth, no matter how insignificant, will always result in increased, utility, which is inversely proportionate to the quantity of goods already possessed. So if you've got lots of money, a little bit more money isn't going to be as meaningful to you as if you haven't got very much money at all. And that's really the sort of the concept of utility. So if you put utility into numbers, somebody said if you've got utility is zero for $0, and then you've got say $10 million, you could have a utility of 10 for that $10 million. Now, if then you say have another $10 million and you've got $20 million, well, perhaps the utility, of that overall only goes up to 12. So you can see this sort of diminishing returns type of approach, and that made a lot of sense to a lot of people, and that was sort of one of the approaches that lasted a long time. And okay, let's have another little example here. Now we've already looked at problem 1. Where he said we've got an 80% chance of $4,000 and 100% chance of $3,000, and we had about 80% choose B. Now, if we have another situation where you've got the option of a 20% chance of winning $4,000 and we'll say that's a 1 in 5 chance of $4,000 and a 1 in 4 chance of $3,000. I don't know, anybody got any thoughts what they prefer? So it doesn't matter, just call out, anybody? Who's for C? Put your hand up, C. Your hands, okay. It's probably about sort of 50% of D. Oh yeah, we've got 25, fewer for D. Okay. So what do we have? Typically 65% choose C, 35% choose D. Now that's probably fairly logical in terms of potential earnings in that respect. Okay. All right. Now throw another one. There's just move on. Okay. Let's go on to a third problem. Alright, now this is a two-stage problem. The first stage, you've got a 75% chance that the game ends without winning anything, and 25% chance that you move to the second stage. Okay. If you reach the second stage, you've got the choice of E or F. E is 80% chance of winning $4,000 and a guaranteed $3,000. Okay? But you've got to choose between E and F before the game starts. Right? Before you've actually got through that phase 1, you've got to decide whether you're going to go for E or F. Okay? Does that make sense? So, what do you think? What do you choose? Just recap. First stage, you've got a 75% chance of winning, that the game ends without winning anything. So first stage, 75% game over. If you get through to the second stage, you've got to choose between E or F. but you've got to choose between E or F before you get to the first stage. Okay? So, what are you going to choose? Who would choose E? Put your hands up if you want to choose E. A few there. Probably about 10% there. F. Okay, everyone's going for F. Okay. All right. Now, typically, it's probably about right. About 20%, 22% choose E, 78% choose F. Okay. Now, there's one thing that's kind of interesting with this. This is similar to problem 1. Remember problem 1? But is actually identical to problem 2. If you look at, if Dr. Spock was looking at this. Now, these are sort of decision trees, and don't want to sort of go into sort of a lot of detail. But what we've got effectively here is on problem 2, we've got a standard risk problem with two choices. Choice between two risky projects. On problem 3, we've got a sequential risk problem, which is maybe an investment in a risky project with two types of return. Now, logically, the outcomes are the same, right? But the way we perceive the problem is actually different. And so, let me think the best way to explain it. I don't know if you can see by the probabilities. In the first problem, if you multiply the probabilities out, 4,000 times 0.2, I'll scribble this down, is equivalent to E, which is 4,000 times 0.2. D, 3,000 times 0.25, is again equivalent to 3,000 times 0.25. Although, the way that you decided as a group, 65% of you chose C when it was a standard risk problem, but then when it was a sequential risk problem, you actually chose the other way around. So, final states were the same, although the way we approach the problem from our sort of our brains was slightly different. So, I guess the point that there's a couple of points that we can carry through from this is that the decisions we make are associated in the way that they're presented. Not just based on the facts that are there. And the other thing is that Bernoulli said that it's all associated with what happens in the final state. But in actual fact, we're making decisions not necessarily based on the final state. We're making decisions based on how we get to that final state, which is slightly different. And the point is that Bernoulli's equation is actually inadequate or incomplete. Now this is probably sort of a little bit confusing. We'll go through some more examples in a little bit, but this is quite a sort of explicit way of showing how often we think is not necessarily the most logical way. I mean, here's another sort of little question. I'll keep drilling you tonight with all these questions. You've been given $1,000, and you've got to decide whether you accept another $500 guaranteed, or toss of the coin, so it's 50-50, means that you get an additional $1,000 if it's heads, or no additional money if it's tails. Okay, does it make sense? Which would you choose, A or B?
A.
A. Everyone wants to go for A. Is there anybody who wants to go for B? One? Yeah, there's a couple there for B. Okay. Right. Okay, typically 84% say A. I think we've kind of like agreed with that. Alright. Now, we've been given $2,000 this time. Right, next question. You've got to decide whether you want to give back $500 for sure, or toss a coin, where if it's heads, you give back $1,000, or if it's tails, you keep the $2,000. Okay? That make sense? So you've been given $2,000. Choice is give back $500 guaranteed, or toss a coin where you give back $1,000, or you keep the $2,000. So who's for C? See, there's a few, yeah, probably about 20%. Who's for D? Oh, we've got the gamblers out here tonight. Typically, it's about right for that. It's going pretty well. Typically 31% select for sure C. So C, that was give back, that was the certainty one, give back 500 for sure. So more people like to gamble in that situation. Alright. So 84% choose for sure 500 in the first case. 31% choose sure in the second case, despite exactly the same payoff. I don't know if anybody picked up on this, but the end result of the gamble is exactly the same. Whether I give you 1,000 now and get you to gamble on another 500 to increase that, or whether I give you 2,000 now and then give you the option to gamble and lose some of it. So the actual payoffs were exactly the same for both those two questions. Although, in one case, a lot of you said, yes, I'm going to take this for sure, in the first case. In the second case, I'm going to gamble. So, you see where I'm getting at? The way we're thinking isn't logical. Right? We're making decisions which are not based on logic. We're making decisions based on our emotion or our feelings about, oh, I could win some money, or oh, I could lose some money. Yeah. So how offers and how decisions are framed, often we call this as a form of framing, is integral to the types of answers that we get down the track. Okay, so if I frame a question to say, I'm going to give you $2,000 and then I'll let you gamble to pay some back or keep it, or I'm going to give you $1,000 and then I'm going to give you an opportunity to increase that, you make different decisions based on that. So the way the whole thing is framed is critical to that. Now there's some other facts associated with this, and this is where Bernoulli and his curve and his equation kind of was lacking. And there's a chap called Daniel Kahneman and Tversky, and a couple of psychologists who won a Nobel Prize in economics for this piece of work. And it's fascinating. I forget when it was. I think they got it in the early 90s. But it's one of these pieces of work which is so fundamental people just ignore, but yet keep making the same mistakes over and over again. Let me explain. What we're looking at is a little bit like the Bernoulli equation here, or the curve. But what I guess it's slightly different. what Kahneman Tversky said was that the way we treat losses is different to the way we treat gains. So if I'm in a situation where I'm taking a risk of losing some money, I treat that decision differently as if it was the same probability that I was about to gain money. Okay. And we are naturally averse to losses, far more so than we are seeking gains. So we find it a lot more painful to have a loss of, say, $1,000 compared to a win of $1,000. Now, I don't know if anyone can relate to that. If you go to the horse races, right, and you put your $10 bet on and you lost it, you go, damn it. But if it's a 2-to-1 bet and you win, another $10 back, you go, oh yeah, $10, yeah, that's good, And it hasn't got that same kind of emotional connection as that loss has. Now, there's a book that I spoke about in the very first lecture called Fooled by Randomness by a chap, his name escapes me now, Taleb, Nassim Taleb. And he has a good relationship, and hopefully actually today I've got a video, if we can get it on the internet, a bit of an interview between Daniel Kahneman and also Nassim Taleb, talking about how these sorts of decision issues impacted the GFC, and hopefully I'll get some time to put that on later. What was I saying? The interesting thing that Nassim came up with, he said, it makes me smile. If we think about day traders, has anybody here been thinking about being a day trader? Put your hand up if you do a bit of dabbling. Yeah, we've got a couple here. Yeah, another one there. Yeah, okay, that's great. Read his book. Read this book, Fooled by Randomness, before you get too deep into that, because I think it might make you more aware of some of the issues associated with it. And one of the things that I think of and I find fascinating is that, imagine I'm a day trader and I've put some, I want to say bets, put some bets on, and some stocks have gone up. I feel good about that. And but then when those stocks go down, I think, oh damn it, I should have pulled the money out. I should have held on to that position. And you beat yourself up about it. And in emotional, if you've got like if your emotional well-being is like a bucket of emotion, right? When you've had a good thing happen, that bucket level goes up a little bit. We have a win. When you have a loss, it drains out probably more than it would if it was an equivalent win. And this is what this curve's all about here. The value that we associate wins and losses is different, right? We associate a lot more value with a small loss compared to the gain. Now, let me demonstrate this. You can, a little pointer there. If you imagine, say, we've got a loss of, I don't know, call that $1,000. The value, our negative value, is sort of down here somewhere. If we've got that same amount over here, we go up here, the value is not quite as high. Right? So the value associated with that monetary gain or loss is different depending on whether it's a win or a loss. That ties into that little question before of whether I give you $2,000 and take 1,000 away, or I give you 1,000 and give you another 1,000. Now, what Taleb was saying is, if you're a day trader, imagine, right? If you're any kind of trader, let's see if we can put this on. .cam. Right. Now you'll be thinking, okay, I'm a day trader. What am I going to do? I'm going to probably pick some volatile stocks, because I can ride the gains and short the losses, make lots of money. Now, imagine the stock price is kind of going up and down, but it's got a trend, you know, which is generally going up. Is that coming out? Okay. Not in focus, is it? Focus. Okay. Now, if I'm a day trader and I'm basically riding this curve, every time the curve goes up, yay, I've got a win. My emotional bucket goes up a little bit. But every time it comes down, I go, oh, bugger. You know, I'm losing out. So my emotional bucket, if you like, has a bigger loss. So over a period of time, when you're riding up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down, the bucket of emotion is going to get pretty well drained. Now, if you are a longer term investor and you weren't checking the stock price every day, and you maybe, this is time, say here, obviously, and stock price, and you checked it here, and then a month later you checked it here, you would recognise between those two checkpoints got a gain. Hey, I feel pretty good about that. So if you're a longer term investor and you're able to filter out the noise, the daily noise, on an emotional basis, you're probably going to be a lot less stressed compared to somebody who's really living every little bump. And this is one of the things that goes on. So if you are a day trader, and the advice is try to decouple yourself from the emotional decision making that goes on between wanting to hang on to your losses or not responding to losses. So you treat your losses in the same way as you treat your gains. Right. So basically, what you have to do is looking at this curve. Looking at let's go back to the PC curve. Going back to this curve, you've got to sort of try and for yourself turn this curve here into a mirror image of the one at the top. Right. So whether it's a loss or a gain, there's no emotional emotional difference to you, and that's really the sort of the message that comes out of it. Okay. Yeah. So the other thing that a key point that came out of this is that gains and losses are relative, not absolute, as with Bernoulli. Bernoulli said that the utility associated with an increase in wealth is based on your original wealth. Now, what Kahneman and Tversky discovered is that you actually, the way you feel about losses or gains is associated with your near losses or gains, or your recent history. Now, that's the next slide. Just jumping ahead a little bit. And what do we mean by this? So, your appetite for risk is associated with what's happened relative to some reference point. So it's not your absolute wealth that decides whether you're going to bet $100 at the races or $50 at the races. It's not your absolute wealth. It's typically whether you've recently had a win at the races or not. So think of, have I got this example? Now, saying people are not so much risk averse as loss averse. So it's when we incur losses that generally sort of affects our decision making abilities and taints us. But then there's a period of time that we kind of sort of almost forget about that. I think of it in terms of have you ever broken up with a girlfriend or something like that? They say, oh, give it time, your emotional sort of well-being will get back to normal over a bit of time. And it's a little bit like that here with your losses. You go, oh, I had a really bad day at the races, I lost all my money. Give it time. In a couple of weeks you'll probably be back at the races and completely forgotten about that, and your risk taking will be probably back to where it was. However, just after the races and just after you've made those lost those bets, the way you make decisions is going to be affected by that near-term experience. So the other thing is, people are more concerned about the change in wealth than about its absolute level, which again is the thing about Bernoulli. Bernoulli said absolute level. We're interested in our absolute wealth. A person who's not made peace with his losses is likely to accept gambles that would be unacceptable to him otherwise. Now, I think of the example of, talk about the races a lot. It's a good example to talk about risk taking. When I've been at the races, sometimes I've had a bad day, and the last race comes along, and I look at the last race thinking, gee, I've had a bad day, and this is the time to make my money back. Has anybody else experienced that? I don't know. You go, okay, so I've got $5 left. Right, I've got to win back. I've got to win back my losses now. So the last race of the day is typically a bunch of old nags who probably didn't deserve a race anyway, and they're just making up the numbers, or they're young horses, or they're very risky horses. So the odds are sort of long odds, and so you go and go, okay, I'll put my $5 on the sort of 15 to 1, and I should win my losses back there. So you take risks, which you wouldn't otherwise take. If you'd had a good day, when I've had a good day, I look at the last race and my pocket's full of money, and I think, stuff it, I don't need any more risk taking here. So my risk appetite is different depending on my recent experience as to whether I've had losses or gains. And I think this is something that in business also is something to keep aware of. If the business hasn't been going particularly well, there's a likelihood that the business will take more risks than it would if it didn't. On the other hand, if the business has been going particularly well, perhaps that business will start to become more risk averse and not take risks that it should take. Which is perhaps the most important thing. So you get a situation where a business is doing well, it's kind of fat and happy. It doesn't invest in new technologies, it doesn't push into new markets, it doesn't innovate, because it's sort of fat and comfortable, and that gives its competitors an opportunity to move ahead. So I think this sort of psychology of risk appetite is a really important one. I've done a sort of a fair bit of reading in risk appetite type stuff, and people go, oh well, we need to base our risk appetite on our exposure to high risk sovereign areas in the world, and we want to keep our debt ratios within this sort of area, and we need to sort of manage our risk appetite in these other things. But when it comes to strategic decisions, often strategic decisions are often made without reference to some of these appetite sort of indicators, and they're made on sort of gut feel. Oh yeah, this business opportunity feels good, I think we should do it, let's go for it. And it's those sorts of that sort of decision making which is going to be affected by gains or losses in the recent past. And this is where all of this sort of psychology of risk taking, decision making then comes in. So really that's sort of the main sort of message that Kahneman and Tversky sort of came up with, and they came up with this in early 1990s, I think, and all the papers that I read have no reference to this, in terms of appetite, and I think it's a huge area that's understated. The decisions that we make, we talk about the bat and the ball, it happens everywhere we go. We're making these decisions, but we're not understanding why we're making these decisions and the like. Now, another, I guess I'm really now sort of explaining to you why we make decisions that perhaps Dr. Spock wouldn't necessarily make. And these are sort of some general rules that people follow, sort of on a psychological basis, you could say. There's one of the things that generally people underweight moderate and high probabilities. Think about the lottery. Has anybody bought lottery tickets here? Pop your hand up. Probably more than one. Bought lottery tickets, yeah. When you bought that lottery ticket, what did you consider to be the probability of winning? I mean, pretty small? Eh? Very small. Did you think you were going to win? Why did you buy the ticket? Sorry? To be a winner, to be a lottery. Well, that's fair enough. That's fair enough. I mean, does anybody know what the odds are of winning Tax Lotto? Anybody? 9 million? More than 1 million? Yeah, I haven't got the numbers here, but I looked it up one day and I was amazed. It's I don't know, it's sort of in sort of 10 million, probably higher than 1 in 10 million sort of chance. 1 to 32 million. 1 to 32 million. Okay. Now that's interesting. So 1 in 32 million. If it was 1 in 20 million, would that change your decision? Those of you who hadn't bought a ticket, would you now go out and buy a ticket? No? If it was 1 in 10 million, would that change your opinion? If it was 1 in 100 million, but I mean, when we're talking sort of such huge orders of scale here, when we start trying to think about what does that mean? What's the difference between 1 in a million and 1 in 32 million? What does that really mean? How can we kind of grab hold of that? You know? And so, as people, we're really, really bad at dealing with big numbers. Yeah. And so, we tend to underweight those probabilities. You go, oh well, 1 in 32 million, 1 in 10 million, that's all the same, you know. Just buy a ticket. I might win. You know? And this is the way we think. There's no sort of logic. We don't go, oh well, what's the potential winnings here? Actually, I'll give you a tip. If you do want to win the lottery, I think, what's the numbers you can choose? You can generally choose your own numbers, can't you? Up to about 1 to 40? 40? Yeah? Pick numbers which are above 31. Right? Do you know why? Anyone guess why? The possibility that you win big is a lot higher, because a lot of people, when they pick their numbers, they pick them on birthdays. So if you were to analyse, you know, the sort of distribution of numbers that people are choosing, the bulk of the numbers is between 1 and 31. Right? So if you go and pick all the numbers which are higher than 31, there's very few people who are also going to be picking those numbers. So you can take all the money yourself. Right? Now, I'm not saying you should go out and buy a lottery ticket, but if you are thinking of it, that's something to keep in mind. Right? So I'll give you another tip actually. The horse races, keep an eye out for the female jockeys as well. A lot of the people that go betting on horses don't reckon female jockeys are any good. But statistically, they're just as good as everybody else. All right? So the likelihood is that you'll get better odds if you go and bet on a female jockey. Yeah, these are all kind of mad ideas of mine. I'm not rich yet, so read into that what you want. The other thing that sort of so when we get down the bottom here, you see this curve. We've got decision weight, and really, I guess the black line is our perception of the risk. So what we're saying is, we don't make decisions based on true risk. We have a perception, and our perception is generally things are not as risky as they really are. So that's why the line is kind of like moved away. And the other thing is when we get down to this low area, this is sort of less than 1 in 100, one in sort of, I don't know, what would it be, about 1 in probably 1 in 20, 1 in 30, 1 in 40, 1 in the millions, the lottery type stuff. We're really bad at knowing, understanding what that means to us. So we put too much weight on the actual probabilities. So we're thinking something will happen when it probably won't. Now up here, something interesting happens as well. We put an awful lot more weight on anything that is a near certainty or a certainty. I'll give you another example. Think about. I'm not saying we should do this, but if we were to play Russian roulette, right? Does anybody here know what Russian roulette is or come across it? Yeah. Anybody who's never heard of Russian roulette? Yeah, maybe a couple. Russian roulette. It's one of these crazy games where you get a revolver with can take 6 bullets, and you see it in some of the gangster movies. And you put 1 bullet in, and then you spin the chamber, and then put it up to your head, and you have to shoot yourself. And if there's no bullet in there, well, it's a good day. Sometimes it's not a good day. Yeah. Now, so hypothetically, if you were playing Russian roulette, and somebody said to you, "Okay, I'll offer you, or I'll make you a deal. How much are you prepared to pay if I take that bullet out?" Right. So you're in a situation where you've got to play Russian roulette, and somebody says, "Look, how much would you pay to take that bullet out?" So basically, buy your life. So it became a certainty that you wouldn't get killed. Now, anybody. The numbers are relevant really, but I don't know. Say, what numbers? Say $100,000. $100,000 to buy the bullet. If that's agreed. Now, if there were 2 bullets in the chamber, 6th chamber, right? And I offered the same deal. I said, how much would you be prepared to pay to remove 1 bullet? But there's 2 bullets in there now. Would you be prepared to pay $100,000 to remove that 1 bullet, even though there's going to be 1 remaining? Eh? It would be less. Who would pay more than? Who would pay $1,000? Sorry, did I say $100,000 to remove 1 out of the 2 bullets? Put your hand up. No? Nobody? 1? Maybe 2? Okay. Who would be prepared to pay? $150,000. Right? So more than. Nobody? Less than. So $50,000. What should be the maximum price that you'd be prepared to pay? 50,000 or less than 100? Yeah. Yes, there's a few nods going on here. Yeah. Now that's kind of interesting because what you just demonstrated is effectively this point about this certainty, this idea of certainty. You're prepared to pay a lot more money for certainty, even though what you're actually doing is reducing the likelihood by the same amount in both cases. So in first case, you're reducing the likelihood being killed by removing one bullet becomes certain. So removing that 25% to be no, not 25, it's 1 in 6, whatever that works out to be. 15, was it about 15% or something? So you're reducing the likelihood by 15%. In the second example, you're still reducing the likelihood by the same amount, 15%, but you're prepared to pay less for it. Does that make sense? Yes, there's a few nods around. So what you're putting a different value on reducing the same amount of probability. So you're putting more value on being able to reduce that probability to 0 than reducing that probability, say, from 30% to 15%. Yeah? There's a few sort of blank looks. Right? But the point is that we overvalue, well, not we overvalue, we highly value any decision which would give us a sort of certainty. Okay. Now, okay. Well, let's take a 10-minute break, and then what we'll do is there's a few more sort of examples I want to go through. In the last, it's only one slide, and then we'll see if we can get a bit of a video happening with that discussion, and I'll be interested to get a bit of a discussion with you guys later. So 10 minutes from now, let's say 7:15. If you can come back here, try and be prompt so we don't have too much door clanging, and we'll see you then.
Do you want to understand why it is 5 cents?
Why is it 5 cents?
Yeah.
Okay.
It should be, the total is the 1.10 and the bet is the 1, so 1.10 minus 1 is
the bet costs $1 more than the ball.
Yeah.
Alright?
Yeah.
$1 more. That's the key. Alright, so if the ball costs 5 cents, the bat costs $1 and 5 cents. Yeah?
Yeah.
So okay, so the bat and the ball cost $1.10.
Yeah.
$1.10. The bat costs $1 more than the ball. Okay. $1 more. So the bat, the cost of the ball plus $1. Bat's cost, right, plus ball cost plus $1 equals bat cost.
Yes. Okay, yeah. That's words.
It's really just a language thing. Yeah. Okay. Okay. All right. Let's sort of wrap up. Just get that up on. Okay, so I just want to talk about, you guys ready? Just some other sort of psychological effects. We talked a lot about this idea of losses being more averse. You know, we get much more attached to our losses, or have an emotional connection, much stronger emotional connection with our losses than we do with our gains. And this is fundamental for a lot of decision making that goes on in business, and it's things like I don't know if any of you have held on to shares which have continued to make losses instead of just selling them, moving on to find better shares. You kind of have this attachment to bad projects. It happens a lot in industry. People put a fair bit of money into a project. That project doesn't go well, or a business, and they just keep pumping more money into it. Often this can be explained, you know, through a psychological reason that you know, we put so much emotional energy into our losses that we find it hard to let go of them. And so I think you know, for those of you who are doing other finance subjects, doing economics, MBAs and the like, you know, from my experience, the psychological aspects of decision making are really sort of hardly touched on in some of these other subjects. So I find this area of study quite fascinating, because if we understand this is going on, then we can respond to it. We talked about you know, people prefer being sort of, if your utility bill comes in and you don't pay it, you know, do you prefer to have or not pay it, or it's got to be paid on a certain time? If you pay it on time and you get a discount, does that make you feel better than not paying it on time and getting fine? At the end of the day, it doesn't make a lot of difference to the utility company, depending on how they sell it. So the way it's framed and the way it's presented, you know, has an impact on the way we respond. So this is an emotional response that we give these things. You know, people like to be seen. People like to be given something as a free gift. You know, nothing's free. You know, everything's got a cost. It's factored into whatever else you're buying. But people think, oh yeah, that's something that I'm getting, even though the product they might. Take classic example. For the ladies here, you go into the perfume departments and it says, you know, buy this cologne, or buy this cologne, this perfume, and get a free bag. You know, little, you know, handbag or something with it. You go, oh, that sounds good. You know? I like that. I'm going to buy that because I want the free bag. If it was advertised with buy this perfume and the bag together for this price, you're probably going, well, I don't really want the bag, you know. I don't think I'll buy that. You know? But it's all about perception. It's about, you know, what are you getting, what you believe you're getting. So there's a lot of this stuff going on, and if you're ever studying marketing, you know, you can really sort of have fun getting inside people's heads. There's a thing called the illusion of control. There's been some really interesting experiments done where they said to a group of people, there was effectively two groups of people, and I mean, you can play this on your friends when again horse racing comes up again. Getting the wrong idea about me, but when the Melbourne Cup comes up, if any of you are working in offices, you have sweepstakes. You know, and you go around and says, oh, okay, you know, there's pick a horse. It'll cost you, you know, $1. Pick a horse out of the hat, and whoever wins the winning horse, you know, gets the winnings of the, you know, the money that we've collected. And there was a similar test done with football cards, and. Well, let's go through the horse one. You can do this is how you can do it with your friends. Maybe make yourself some money. But the idea is you go around your friends and you say to them, okay, one group of friends, I'm going to offer you it's $1 for the horse, but you don't get to choose which horse you can pick. Right? And people go and pay their $1 and you just give them a horse. And then you go over to the other group of people and you say, okay, it's $1, but you can choose your horse. You can choose which horse you want. And so they have this sense of, illusion of control. They can't control which horse is going to win, but they can kind of, control which horse they pick. Now, before the race starts, you then go back to the group before the race starts. You say, "Oh look, John, I'm terribly sorry, but there's some people in the other office who really want to join this sweepstake, and they're prepared to pay, more than $1, to buy your ticket off you." Now, if you ask that question to the group of people who typically haven't had a choice as to what horse they can have, they'll probably say, "Oh yeah, how much would you sell the horse for?" They say, maybe $2 money, and they'll sell their horse maybe for $2. I go to the group who's had the illusion of control, and they'll say, "Oh, I picked this horse specially because I like the colour. This is worth at least $8. They want this one, they're going to have to pay $8." So that reflects, even though they haven't got control of the outcome of the race necessarily, but they have had control over the numbers they picked. And the lottery organisations, for example, have spent a lot of time and effort developing systems where you can go in and you can pick your numbers. Kind of touched on that a little bit before. Because people value being able to go and pick their special numbers in the lottery compared to just being allocated any numbers. Even though they haven't got control over the outcome, they just feel more ownership, and this is sort of associated with the propensity to take risk, where you have that illusion of control. Another one is associated with groups, and some of you may have experienced this working in your groups for assignment 1. There are group dynamics that sort of happen where the decisions made by the group may not be necessarily the same as decisions made if you asked each people independently. So when you get people together, maybe they're discussing a risk. Often after the discussion, the risk rating is reduced because you've talked about it with other people. If you were rating that risk on your own, you would probably put that at a higher risk, and again that's been sort of shown in tests. And and so this idea of groupthink as well has an effect. So there's some psychological effects that go on when we're working in groups. Another one which I find sort of quite interesting is comes back to sort of personality types. If you're a very sort of excited, happy, rah, rah, right, the chances are that you will make decisions without really thinking them through. Right? If you're an excitable type of person, and in the opposite sense, if you tend to be a more sort of quiet, sort of almost sort of depressed sort of person, you'll sit there working through every little detail before actually making. You get to a point where you may not even make a decision. So the effect of your mood can influence this. And I mean, you can sort of take the example of if you go to the casino. You go into the casino, it's full of flashing lights, and you go, wow, this is great, yeah, we're all partying, and that's the way they want it to come across. Because when you've got that uplifted mood, the likelihood is that you're going to be taking risks that you probably wouldn't take if the casino was all kind of dark and quiet and everybody's there with their calculators, working their way through. So you can see how this sort of psychological effect affects decision making. Now there's some other sort of intrinsic motivations, and there's a good paper, I think, The Psychology of Risk it's called, I think I've put it on DSO. It's in the readings, I think, but it explains these in a little bit more detail. I don't sort of go on too much about this, but definitely take a look at this paper. It's psychology of risk. If this is an area that you do find interesting, there's some great readings. There's also behavioural economics is a topic. If you want to Google that, there's lots of things on that too. I think there's one more slide. Yeah, just in sort of conclusions around this sort of psychology of risk, and just to reinforce perhaps some of the discussions that we've had earlier. See, my horse racing's come up again. Bernoulli's expected utility theory was inadequate descriptive model of decision making in the presence of risk because it was reference independent. So what Bernoulli was saying was kind of right, but didn't answer the full story. It's a bit like someone said to me. It's a bit like Newton's theory of physics, or sorry. But then Einstein came up with his theory of relativity. So Newton explained it so far, but things didn't quite work. Now Einstein came along with theories of relativity, which then explained an awful lot more. So this is a little bit the same. So Bernoulli came up, explained a fair bit, saying if you're poor, an extra dollar is very important to you. If you're rich, an extra dollar is still nice to have, but not as important as if you were poor. But that was, so he was basing it on your existing wealth. Now what Kahneman and Tversky said, well, that's all very well, but it's associated also the value of your decision making, or the risk, is about what's happened in your recent past, not just about what's in your pocket sort of as a whole. So it's a time-based issue. The other thing is that your attitude to gains is different to your attitude to losses, and that then creates a whole new set of sort of ideas as to how we think about gains and how we think about losses. So really, I guess that's the bottom line. Think about. I guess I just want to get the message across that risk isn't just about pure probabilities. It's not just about working out numbers and coming up with a decision. We're not all Dr. Spocks. We're emotional beings, and we make our decisions based on those emotions that we have and our feelings. And we need to understand that if we're trying to manage risk in an organisation, we're trying to make good decisions. We need to keep in mind these issues. So I was gonna try and bring up this presentation on on 4TV, but it's not coming up, unfortunately, which is a real shame. If you get time, I've put on the lecture notes the link for this. But if you look up fora.tv and probably do a search on Nassim Taleb, Kahneman, or Reflection on Crisis, it's a little bit meandering, but there's some good takeaway points. One of them, that I remember, this guy Nassim Taleb, he says one of the problems with our banking system and the way business is set up is that we're happy to make small little gains, one little gain, but then when black swan events occur, I don't know if I've spoken to you about black swan events, that they come and wipe us out, and we're prepared to take those sorts of risks. And so he calls it. He says it's like eating like chickens and going to the toilet like elephants. So that's our propensity for risk taking. We're happy for these little gains, and we're also happy for things to suddenly go wrong. And so this comes back to this idea of black swan events, and so we're happy not to consider those because somebody else will worry about those. We're just worried about eating like chickens all the time. So so that was some of his comments. So really, it's kind of cut this session short a little bit. Has anybody got any thoughts? I mean, very happy to sort of discuss the psychology of risk. I'm not a psychologist or an expert, but anybody got any questions as to what we've spoken about? Any thoughts? I mean, have you think of any examples where decisions are being made perhaps on emotion, again, compared to rational thought? Yeah?
People find they will make decisions more like quality decisions rather than people like active and focused.
Sorry?
You say like people intend more quiet, so they make the quality decisions better than
Quiet people make better decisions. That's maybe. Has anybody got any thoughts on that? Do quiet people make better decisions than loud people? Any thoughts? I think there's a lot of decisions that are being made which are not well thought through. If you think of the HIH fiasco, if you've read that paper, the CEO at the time of HIH was a very forceful character and was making decisions or encouraging people to make decisions which weren't thought through well. So again, there was sort of a lot of emotion going on in the boardroom associated with HIH, and eventually resulted in their downfall. Okay. Well, that's really sort of it for psychology of risk. I thought perhaps having read some of the assignments for assignment 1, I wanted to just touch on some of the things that I picked up on. I've looked at half a dozen papers, not all of them, but there was a bit of a theme sort of coming through, and think of it in terms of, well, what can we learn from assignment 1 that's going to help you in assignment 2? I think the one thing that sort of one thing that came through was people weren't really looking at how the marks were being allocated in assignment 1. I think about 50% of the marks were being allocated to reflecting on how the process follows AS 4360 or HB 436. And there was a tendency for some of the papers to jump straight in and have long discussions about the risks themselves, and not really focus on the process that we were interested in seeing that you had a strong understanding of. So I guess this goes through to the exam as well. Make sure that you look carefully at where marks are being allocated. When we mark papers, we want to give you marks. We're not trying to take them away or anything like that. We're trying to give them to you. So if you make it easy for us to give them to you, we'll give them to you. But if if there's 50% of the marks, on how you're following the process, but there's only like one paragraph on that, it makes it very difficult for us to give you those 50% of marks. So certainly make sure that you keep an eye on how those marks are being allocated. For assignment 2, we've got here original thought 25%, content 25%, evidence and research 25%, quality of presentation 25%. So what we're really interested in doing is making sure that, or for you guys to make sure that you reflect in your assignments that allocation of marks. Now, original thought. What does original thought mean? Well, we're interested in critical thinking? You know, are you just regurgitating something that you've read somewhere and just sticking it down for us to read as well, or are you putting something together where you've thought about the two sides of an argument and then had some kind of discussion as to which side of that argument perhaps is the most relevant in the situation? That's the kind of thing that we're really looking to you guys to provide us with, to show that you've understood your topic and that you've got some, you know, original thinking, some critical thinking. In terms of content, what we're looking for there, particularly if you're reviewing an organisation that we're not familiar with, you know, some kind of information to show where you've got that sort of material is really about the content. Are you just sort of dancing around some, you know, the information in an annual report or something, which is pretty lightweight, or, you know, have you actually gone and had an interview with a risk manager and actually reviewed their documentation and had some more interaction? So is there any meat to this? You know, that's sort of the content. What's that? Evidence and research, well, that's sort of tied up in that as well, to show that you know, you've actually done some research, not just grabbing a whole bunch of information from a company, but you're also reading around the subject as well. So you're connecting what you see in that company to other pieces of research work or other pieces of information, other documents around that. Quality of presentation, really that's how you're communicating to us and how the whole thing comes across. Last year we had a few papers come in which were fantastic. I would have quite happily put them to clients to say, hey, look, we've done a consultative paper. Here it is. They were well structured. They were clearly, you know, they were well written, logical, easy to follow, and were really good. So I urge you really to think about you know, how you structure your papers, how you arrange the content, the thought that you put into it, and really, you know, show us the best job you can do. This is all from the assignment sheet. Another part here is the structure, recommended structure really. One thing is appendices. I'm very happy for you guys to put in whatever appendices that you think are appropriate. Those aren't included in your word counts. And you know, if in doubt, put it in the appendices. We actually can return all the hard copies to you. So if you've got appendices which are only in hard copy, just put them in the hard copy. They're the ones we mark. Don't worry about having to put in appendices into the essay. In terms of structure, we're really following a standard structure. I've just put down here executive summary, introduction, background, methodology for option A, findings, discussion, recommendations, conclusion, and appendices. So there's plenty of information on how to structure these sorts of papers on the internet or within Deakin website. So certainly take a look at that if you're in doubt. Anybody got any questions, thoughts on assignment 2 at this stage? There's been a few sort of questions floating around. It's worth 40% of your total assignment or total unit, so keep that in mind. You know, it's a significant part. I guess the other thing to mention to you is the exam paper has been set for this unit now. We've had to get that in already. And that's 50% for this unit. A word on that is it's an open book exam. Just interested. Anybody here has done an open book exam before? Put your hand up. See hands. Yeah. Okay. For those of you who haven't done an open book exam, it doesn't mean that you can cheat, because pretty much you can bring in materials, whatever materials you need. Last year I was marking the papers, and it was very interesting because there were some fantastic answers to the first question, and went on for 6, 7, 8 pages. and then question 2 was sort of maybe 4 or 5 pages, and then question 3 was maybe 2 pages, and then question 4 was maybe 1 page, and question 5 was half a page, and question 6 was just a whole bunch of scribble. So everybody came out going, there wasn't enough time, and that's the challenge, really. It's not this isn't, the exam isn't necessarily about what you can remember and we sort of regurgitate, answer the questions and everything. It's about perhaps having a depth of understanding of knowing kind of perhaps quickly what reference material you might need to use. In general, I remember doing open book exams. I brought all this material in, I never actually opened it, I never looked at it because I didn't have time. But really, I guess the challenge of open book is how you concentrate your thinking, concentrate your thoughts. There's so much information that you could include, but the challenge is really being able to distill that information into almost bullet points and kind of working through those bullet points. So I would definitely sort of start thinking in terms of, if you're doing revision, read some papers and then just note down a few bullet points as to what those key points are that those papers are telling you. There's a lot of reading associated with this unit, but that's just the nature of it. It's not, we haven't got a textbook that we just give you and say study this textbook and then go to the exam. It's all about sort of trying to understand depth of understanding and understand the different things that can influence answers, and we're looking for your depth of understanding. Any thoughts on exam or questions in general? How are you guys going with the assignments? Anybody started on assignment 2 yet? No? Okay. If you're thinking about contacting a company, do that as soon as possible. It takes a long time to get people in people's diaries and get that set up. So the sooner you get onto that, the better. All right. Yeah. What we'll be doing is we'll be going through some exam past papers towards the end of the unit. I think we've got about what's this, week 6? I think we've got 7, 8, 9 of sort of lectures, and then we've got some revision classes where we'll just sit down and we'll just go through some past paper exam questions with you and get your thoughts on that. So I mean the exam is not hard, like the material is not hard, it's just the volume that's the killer. It's just generally the sort of depth of understanding of the material that we're looking to cover. We're covering a huge sort of syllabus, everything from psychology through to other forms of economic decision making and corporate governance and sustainability. We've got sustainability coming up. We've got insurance. We've got strategy and business continuity. So there's a few more sort of topics to cover as they come yet. So hang in there. I think if you put a bit of effort into assignment 2, you'll find the exam pretty straightforward. So good luck with that. Any more questions? Otherwise, I guess we'll call it a night. Yeah, one question.
When we get our results?
We're marking them at the moment. I'm hoping maybe next week. Oh, and what I'm thinking is we'll see how we go, but we might, if it's good assignments, we might get some people to come on and talk, maybe present their assignments as well. So we'll see how we go. Anything else? Okay, thanks very much, everybody.